Madam Chair, I'd like to call up Dr. Dave B. to deliver the budget discussion this evening.
Chairperson Rial, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests, it's my pleasure today to talk a little bit, to continue our conversation on budget development that we started last month talking about in the lead into some pretty important decisions that are going to be coming in the very near future. So what the goal is today is to sort of walk through the general parameters related to the budget, where we're at, what the projections are with sort of the budget as is right now, and then the lead into, okay, what variables does the board have to play with to talk about upcoming decisions? So to give some context, the first decision, or the first two decisions, they're two time-related decisions. First will be in March at the next upcoming board meeting. There will be a proposal on tuition and fees increases, should we get feedback to propose that. And then the second will be related to the employee benefits plan and premium structures. So that'll happen in March. In April, usually April, sometimes May, we have a conversation about capital projects, specific list of capital projects. The preliminary budget then is put all together for the May board meeting. That then sets what we go out to the public in terms of providing information for the public to come and give public comment in June. So after tuition and part of this conversation today, we're going to touch on the key variables, which will be tuition, property tax levy, compensation, and then balancing the budget. So I'm going to walk you through all of those different points. Let me just get this thing going. I want to go through the slides relatively quickly. At the end, what you can't tell in the slides is I actually have a model we can play with. So we can sort of say, well, what would happen if we did a $2 tuition increase and a 2% tax levy, and it'll do some calculations for us so we can play around and sort of see what that leaves and what kind of position that puts us in. It's set up in a 3-year time frame so that we can sort of do a projection for the next couple of years also. Again, so it's sort of building the budget from where we're at right now and then adjusting it for revenue changes, and expenditure changes that we know about. And again, I'll get into more detail in a second in terms of some of those things. So we talked a little bit about expenditure priorities, revenue projections last month. We talked a little bit about right sizing. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about that today, where those numbers came from, why we use those as rough feedback mechanisms, metrics for the college to make sure that we're running a sound operation, that we're in line with peer institutions, that sort of thing. And again, I want to go through, get to the model as quickly as possible, and then really stimulate conversation with the board so that you can talk amongst yourselves, ask questions, that sort of thing, and get some feedback so that we know how to then fold in some of the decisions upcoming. Okay, so these should be familiar at this point. The key priority for this year is we implemented a large change to our classification and compensation structure this last year. We implemented it almost completely. That is, we hired a firm, a nationally known expert in class and comp, to come in, review all of our positions, make recommendations for salary schedules, and then place everybody on the salary scales to try and tag the college's positions to market rates. That's a really important factor, and there are ongoing components to that. So the idea was, with job descriptions, get them tied to salary, national salary survey information, and then try to match to get to the midpoint by an 8-year point at being at the college. So if you were hired at the minimum of that grade scale, that over the course of the next 8 years, you would move along that target to get to the midpoint by 8 years. So that's tying to the market average, so that someone who's at the college in the position with 8 years is getting measured against the market average for that position. So that's how we're making sure that we're paying appropriately for the positions. Again, that's important for us to attract and retain employees. That was a significant investment for the college. Last year, the increases averaged well over 8% in total. And to move people up into that point, so what you said is, the way we did it, if someone was at the minimum before that study was done, and then it said, okay, your market midpoint, you're here, you're at $40,000. The market midpoint is $50,000. So that would be after 8 years, you would expect to be at $50,000. So because a lot of people at the college were hired at the minimum and were at the minimum for years, because of a number of budget-related reasons, that then to get them to that 8-year point would be going from $40,000 to $50,000. I understand the board is interested in more detail about the class comp study, so we'll set up some time at a study session to get into that. That'll be a good lead into the class comps, or to the compensation conversations as well. So when I say that the average increase was about 8% overall, that meant that a lot of people were more than 8% or were about 8% below where their market comparison point was. So when I said we got almost all the way to implementing the recommendations, what we did is we were able to get people all the way to the midpoint if that was where their years of experience were. And then we capped it at 12 years of experience. So there is a cap. And that's one of the ongoing obligations that we're going to have to talk about. And what we were talking about with the AERC groups, the employee representative groups, is what are the priorities going forward? One of them that I think is a minimum expectation is that since we put the cap on 12 years of experience, is that with another year of experience, we want to move that cap up a year at least, and then there are other priorities in terms of lifting the cap further and so forth. So when we implemented it, it was such a big lift. We put a cap on at a relatively high level, but there is a cap. And so trying to uncap it and move people up at the high end of the salary scales will be one of the priorities that we talk about, and we're talking about with the employee groups. Because we're tying to years of experience in position, that now the college has an annual obligation sort of baked in that we want to create as an ongoing part of the budget, that for every year of experience that we have now, overall that costs the college about 2.5% in terms of what an increase to the personnel budget is about 2.5% to move people up 1 year of experience. So again, assuming that we continue to give that recognition for a year of experience, we want to have a salary pool of at least about a 2.5% increase to be able to do that first. I'll talk about that when I start showing numbers that I have that baked into the budget, like that's a starting point because that's sort of an ongoing obligation. And then anything above that is what we'll be talking about. Should we try to do, how much more should we try and do above that? Completing capital construction, that's sort of built in. If it's an already approved capital project, we have money already set aside for it. There's ongoing deferred maintenance type obligations that we want to fold into the budget. Right now, the budget is set pretty much year over year for the ongoing deferred maintenance to be flat year over year. So it's about the same increase, or the same amount is allocated in the budget in the upcoming projections that I'm going to show you as are in the current year budget, which is enough to keep pace with deferred maintenance but not make good progress. So that's going to be something that in the next year or so we'll have more conversations as we fine tune and get a new deferred maintenance model in place that we'll talk to the board about ongoing. Do we want to ratchet that up and start investing more into our deferred maintenance on an ongoing basis? But right now we're starting at sort of keeping things where they were the current year. That's enough for us to sort of keep in a decent place with deferred maintenance. And then with growth areas, if it's something new that the college wants to do, shifting resources is what we really try to prioritize. So what can we not do as much of anymore? What can we shift resources, people working on some of the priorities and doing that over time rather than just adding. We're not in a position with our enrollment to add much, so it's really reallocating. We do have money in the budget every year. We talked a little bit about reserves for things that pop up during the year. It's called the Strategic Initiatives Fund. So we can, during the course of a year, we do have money available. It's over $1 million on an annual basis that we can put into key priorities or things that pop up during the year. So we can be responsive. It is a budgeted line item. So we're not in a place where we're just like desperate if something pops up. If there's an opportunity that we can take advantage of, there are resources that we can tap into for that. Okay, just to recap where we're at from a revenue standpoint, these are the key revenues that hit our operating side of the budget. Tuition right now with where enrollment is at, if we increase tuition by $1 per credit hour, that translates into an increased revenue of about $350,000. Just to give some context, I have some information related to the Arizona Community Colleges. We'll have more information when we take tuition to the board at the March meeting. But right now, they are proposing, I think that there may be one or two that are looking to keep tuition flat, although we're calling it zero if they haven't committed at this point. So a lot of them are also in the same point of conversation with their boards. So my guess is the ones that even say zero will probably have tuition increases. Two colleges are doing larger tuition increases than have happened at any point that I've been at the college, and probably in history. Maricopa is increasing their tuition by, I think it's $12 per credit hour. That's an enormous, a large increase for Maricopa in the past was $5 per credit hour. So this is recognizing there are two reasons why this is happening. They're recognizing that for a number of years they kept tuition flat, and that creates ongoing problems because you don't have that additional revenue built up over time. They have an expenditure limitation problem, and tuition revenue is outside of expenditure limitation. So they're looking to deal with some of their budgetary constraints by increasing tuition. The other one that is $25 per credit hour is when COVID hit, Central Arizona College, which is in Pinal County, they dropped their tuition. They used the federal financial relief money to compensate for reducing their tuition to try and bolster revenue. They're now undoing that decision. It didn't actually result in huge improvements for them. It had a temporary one-time effect. It didn't have a lasting effect in terms of their enrollment, and now they're undoing it by, over the course of 2 years, planning to get back to where they were. So they're having a big $25 per credit hour increase this year. So it's a little bit skewed. Normally, over time, the Arizona colleges increase from $0 to $5 per credit hour is like almost always what happens. At Pima, we have increased up to $5 per credit hour. We've done that, I think, 3 times. Just to give you a little bit of context, in fiscal year 16, we increased at $5. 17 was $3. 18 was $3. 19 was $1. 20 was $2, and 21 was $2.50. 0 increase in 22, and in 23 it was $2. So you can hear, and that's very typical with going back in time. When the fiscal crisis happened and the state reduced the budget to the college, that was the other time when we did $5 increases. So this college has a long history, long commitment to keeping tuition increases as low as possible. So that's tuition. Property taxes range from an increase from $1.8 million, and we have the capacity to go up as high as an additional $7 million. That's because the college did not increase its tax levy a couple of years, and so we maintain the ability to go all the way to the tax levy amount. And last year we increased it by 4%. That was the previous board talked about. We were at the point where we could do 2 years in a row of 4% to catch back up to where we had been for not doing it 2 years. And so the conversation was, the lead-in was this last year, the current year would be a 4% increase, and then the idea was this year would be a 4% increase. Obviously that decision is not a commitment. That was a budget discussion in terms of long range or medium range planning. That's what the board will be talking about a little bit later. So the range there is an increase of $1.8 million. That's for growth in new property, to $7 million. That goes all the way to our levy max. And then other revenues, I talked about this at the last meeting, between Prop 207 and investment income, we're expecting an increase of about $1.6 million, which is going to help for sure with the budget. So talking about a couple of from a scenario perspective, I mean, I outline it in the context of first scenario would be we don't increase those discretionary, we don't increase tuition, we don't increase the tax levy, so we get levy neutral. So you assume the growth in new property, but that's it. That means you don't have to go out to the taxpayers, you don't have to publish anything, you just assume that additional $1.8 million, but there's not an additional tax increase. Anything above that $1.8 million, we have to go through what's called a truth in taxation process. The next scenario is something in the middle. That is, we would increase the property tax by 2%. That would be, again, historically the norm. We used to do that almost every year, other than a couple of years ago. Like I said, there were 2 years where we didn't increase the tax levy, and there was one other year where we went 1% rather than 2%. Going back in time, the 1% was in 2017. The next year we did 3%, so we caught back up the next year. And then in 2021 and 22, we did the zeros. And then that's again why we have our levy max at a bit higher level. The scenario C is sort of maxing out your revenue scenario, right? So that would be increasing all the way to the levy max. You can only do that one time. After that, the board then could only increase it by 2% a year, but the board still can increase it by 2% a year. So it's growth plus 2% a year all the way up to your levy max. Okay, so once we're at the max, it's just an additional 2% per year. Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about right sizing and moving resources. I talked with the board about metrics, both back in, I think, early December, and then we talked a little bit about it a month ago. The idea we have a number of metrics that ensure that we have good stewardship of public funds in terms of making sure that the institution is appropriate for the size of the enrollment that we have. The metrics that we have in place to do that are expenditures per enrollment. We also look at staffing per enrollment. So looking at those, because enrollment has dropped so significantly over the last number of years, our ratios those tracking metrics are out of whack. And I'll talk a little bit more in a second about that. Ongoing challenges, just to outline that, again, I'll get back to the impacts of the struggling enrollment outlook. The potential revenue growth, I just told you, property tax is our biggest revenue source. The Prop 207 has been fantastic, but we can't expect the growth to be like that in the future. It will be a stable revenue source for the college. It will not continue to grow exponentially. We can probably expect that maybe there'll be an additional couple $100,000 a year, but it won't be an additional $500,000 to $700,000 a year or something like that going into the future. Challenges at the college. We're not efficiently structured. We have a lot of locations for the size of our enrollment, and we'll have that as a continued conversation with the board as we sort of work out the second, third year of this 3-year plan as we go in the coming months. Not all of that is critical to decide for that year one, right? We don't have to solve all of the world's problems in year one. We have to start thinking about the next couple of years, though. We can't sort of keep our eyes blind to the future, but we also don't have to be completely reliant on solving the world's problems in 1 year. So we're trying to plan it out over time. How do we get ourselves to be a really efficiently, properly sized institution for our enrollment, both in terms of the revenues coming in, and in terms of our expenditures and the enrollment over time. Okay, some of the ratios that we look at is the full-time student equivalent to staff ratio. We started talking about this in the last year. Overall, the college is a little bit under 12-to-1 in terms of the staff to the number of full-time student equivalents to staff. Historically, that is a very low number, like as in it's bad. From 2012 to 2014, when enrollments were far larger than they are now, the average was around 20-1. So over time, it is degraded. Again, that's mostly because there are two things that were happening. One is enrollment went down significantly over that period of time, most dramatically in the last couple of years. The other thing is that while we did reduce a number of positions in the 15 to 19 range in that time period, we did have a budget reduction plan that was related to expenditure limitation, and it was a 3-year plan to reduce positions. We reduced a number of positions at that point, but when COVID happened, we wanted to make sure that we had a lot of stability, and we did not lay off people, and we did not reduce positions as a result of that. So as a result of that, now our ratios are heavy on the staffing side. Another one that we've had in place for a number of years in terms of a target metric, again, these aren't metrics that are absolute. These don't turn into, oh, you will be 14.000, and that means you're going to cut 102 positions exactly. It is, okay, we're high. How do we come up with a plan to start reducing positions? Historically, we have done it almost exclusively through attrition. That is, when people retire or they leave to other jobs, figure out how to fold those responsibilities into the college and not hire for all those positions, and then eliminate the position and save the money from the budget going forward. We reduced about 200 positions doing that when we had the expenditure limitation challenges. Again, we haven't done that in some time. Right now, it's been more reallocating positions. When someone retires, a lot of times you need that position, so it's been filled. But then there's always a constant conversation with folks to try and go, okay, where do we need positions? Okay, online has been growing. Dual enrollment has been growing. How do we move positions that are vacant into those areas rather than adding positions? In terms of the staffing, there's a instructional faculty ratio that we've used as a target metric since around 2015, if I remember. I'm guessing, I don't remember exactly if it's that's the year, but it's around that time frame. The way that came to be is we wanted to come up with a way to track the number of full-time faculty positions we had for our enrollment. So we went in and we took a look at national data, at the IPEDS data, and looked at our peer institutions and basically came up with a number that our peer institutions for their full-time equivalents, and this is controlled for only general fund operations. So it does not include adult education, it does not include contract education. So it's just the traditional type education. We looked at our peer institutions, and the average for our peer institutions was 50-1. So we looked at that. We didn't just magically make that the number, though. Then we looked at, well, what does that number mean at the college historically? And looking at the college historically, that number was a number that we hit for all intents and purposes in 2014. Now remember, our enrollment has been declining since our peak in 2011. And so at a certain point in time, that it crossed over where the number of full-time instructional faculty positions we had was 50-1, was 2014. That's when we hit that number. There's another reason why that ratio is helpful to the college, because that ensures that depending on our enrollment, if our enrollment grows, it tells us, okay, we need to add full-time instructional positions. It also does another thing, which is ensures that we hold steady with our ratio of full-time faculty to adjunct faculty. Because if we're holding one of those constant, right, the full-time instructional faculty to full-time student equivalents is held constant, that means that when you're growing, you're also adding adjunct faculty at the same relative ratio. So it does a couple of things at the same time. Again, it isn't a number when we came up with that number that was like shocking historically. Like I said, it was like, and we came up with this number, actually I said it was in like 2015. It was a little bit later than that. It was like in 2017. It was like, yeah, actually that makes sense. This was actually probably a pretty good period in time with the college. When we were in 2011 and our enrollment was at 23,000 FTSE, we did not have enough full-time instructional faculty at the time. Like from this ratio, it would have said we would have had to add about 50 positions, something like that. If I remember, I'm going off memory, but it was adding quite a few more positions. Now, there's a reason for that, but that's history, and we'll talk about that another time sometime. But anyway. So hopefully that gets at where those ratios came from. And so they're tied to national data for peer institutions. But we never take that as like sort of an exclusive answer. We also look internally and go, does that actually make sense at the college? The staffing ratio information for national comparisons, we are extremely high from a staffing standpoint to enrollment compared to peer institutions nationally. There's a big reason, there are a number of reasons for that though. So it doesn't become an absolute, it becomes like, well, we're high, and here it kind of proves it. One of the reasons is because there are some states where things like HR are done on a statewide level. HR meaning class comp decisions or their information technology infrastructure, things that we have to manage in-house. Employee benefits, for example, we have to manage that in-house. That makes us inefficient. But the truth of the matter is the fact that we have so many different locations and the fact that we've shrunk so much since our peak, we are very inefficient at the college. There's no question about it. So it's sort of like, okay, what's a good measure? Let's try and head towards that. But it's never intended and it's never been an absolute that told you definitively, we're cutting 545. It's never been used that way. Again, it's more like, how can we try and head in that direction, have a plan through attrition to shrink the size of our staff, that sort of thing. Okay, this is a recap and I'm about to get into the more fun stuff. Again, the levy information is, if we go all the way to the levy max, it adds 7.2 million, and then 2%, and then, this is looking at the 3-year outlook. So if we went 4% that first year, again, I told you that then keeps us we're at the max, we can only do 2% after that. That gives you an idea that it's a one-time additional $3 million essentially. What year that happens is something that, that's not yet to be determined, but that could move depending on how you decided to do it. But it's basically 7.2 million for 4 would be how it would play out if you did the levy max in the first year. And then the moderate increase, again, a $3 tuition increase is historically normal for the college to do. We never like to increase tuition, but that's a fairly moderate increase, particularly given all of the additional costs the college has had to absorb in the last year. That would be about $1.1 million of additional revenue. It is also important to note that one of the things when our credit rating agencies take a look at the college related to our revenue bonds, the revenue bonds are a commitment on tuition on non-property tax-based revenues. So that's why it's called a revenue bond. So it's other revenues, with our primary other revenue being tuition. So as enrollment declines, that puts pressure on that revenue source that is that commitment that we're using to pay those obligations going out into time. And as enrollment has declined, our credit ratings have held steady because of strong management perspective and good financials and good financial performance and management approaches. One of the things they have hinted at is that as enrollment has declined, if we don't increase tuition, that might be a sign that we're not interested in keeping a healthy balance in terms of the revenue proportion that is, again, because we're committing some amount. It's only $4 million, so it's not a major commitment on an annual basis. But there's a commitment on an annual basis for tuition revenue to go there. And so credit rating agencies, if there isn't a moderate increase in tuition and enrollment stays flat or goes down, they might find that a little bit concerning and might drop their credit rating a little bit. I mean, I'm not trying to panic you. It isn't something to panic over, but it is something to be aware of, that does factor into how we're looked at as a college. Okay, this one, if you got a chance to take a look at it, this is what the model looks like if you bake in all of our ongoing obligations. So that is the thing that I talked about. Everybody gets another year of experience. We move people up. We move that cap up 1 year. That is built into this from a salary standpoint. It does not include any increases for adjunct faculty. A percentage increase for adjunct faculty is around $120,000, give or take, something like that. So it's not huge, but that's something that the college has also made a lot of effort in recent years to make sure that our adjunct faculty rate is competitive. And so that's something that we would prioritize as an increase going forward. So think about a little bit over $100,000 for every percentage increase there. And then, so it doesn't include that. And it doesn't include any increase to people other than a year of experience, right? So there are a lot of people who are at the cap, who are above their target point. So that would be holding everybody flat, just giving people a year of experience is what this model looks like. It includes a little additional money for contractual obligations, utility increases, particularly system licenses costs, things like that that go up each year. So there's a little bit of additional money on the operating side for that, but it's a fairly moderate increase in terms of how we're looking at it. Again, this is sort of the minimalist budget of where we're at now. If we don't reduce anything, but we keep sort of doing what we're doing now, that's what this thing shows. Now, looking at this, it also, as I mentioned, the first built-in assumption is that this does not have a tax levy increase. So this is just getting the new growth, and it does not have a tuition increase in it. So again, this is, if we don't do anything, this is kind of what it looks like. We have revenue potential on the upside. It also doesn't have reductions in it, so that's another thing that we have that we can talk about. So you notice, though, is sort of the baked-in starting point without increasing revenues, is it shows that the next year's budget is about $1.6 million worse than where we're at right now. Position equivalency, that's just to kind of to humanize it a little bit, that $1.6 million is if you said reduce by that much. We want to have a budget cut of $1.6 million. We don't want to increase revenues at all. We want to make it up in a reduction. Board says find $1.6 million in reductions. That would be about 20 positions, give or take. And think about it, the college cannot just reduce on just the operating side and not personnel. Our operating is far more committed and structured. There's not a lot of discretionary money in our operating budget. So think about it, if you did say that we should reduce by, say, $1 million, figure about $900,000 of that is probably going to have to come out of personnel. So some can come out of operating, but it's mostly going to be coming out of personnel. So this is kind of what it looks like going forward. I'll start with the frightening proposition, but again, I told you that's before we do anything on the revenue side. Okay, and then this model is the one that I have built to play with. So this is a static one, just so that we could have it in this presentation. What this one does, so that model I just showed you, that version I just showed you was like that scenario A, right? That's without increasing tuition, without increasing the tax levy. That's what that looks like. This is now structured to be much more what the college typically does. So this is increasing the tax levy by 2% and increasing tuition by $3. And as you can tell, that makes a significant difference in terms of the bottom line. In addition to that, it also gives us about 2% of salary pool money to distribute to handle the things above the year of experience. So that is, the employee groups are going to have certain priorities that would give us money for addressing some of the priorities, moving the cap up, giving a minimum increase to people who are already above their target point, so they're not going to get a year of experience, and adjunct faculty pay. So it would give a pool increase of about $2.6 million for us to distribute in various ways that we'll have conversations with employee groups, and then we'll have conversations with the board. Just a high level number of what that would shake out to look like. Overall, that would be a personnel increase of about 4%. And as you see at the bottom, that's still a net negative, but $500,000 is not too big of an issue in terms of how big our budget is. So it's a decent starting point, at least to think about. That's scenario B. Obviously, anything we go above that in terms of tapping into either tuition increases above a $3 increase or the tax levy increase above 2%, that then would give us more money to do into bigger pool increases. Because as you can imagine, a 2% salary pool above a year of experience is not actually very much when you're factoring in inflation and where we're at right now. Okay. Again, I talked a little bit about the next steps in terms of budget, and then I'm going to pull up our model and we can you guys can ask questions and we can play around a little bit. We're going to take a proposal to the board in March for tuition. Again, that's why we're looking for feedback tonight, is sort of what it looks like, how the board feels about a potential tuition increase. Obviously, if we don't increase tuition, we don't need to take that to the board. Any increase that we have to take in March so that we can get it in time for the schedule of courses that goes out in April for fall semester. So we want to get any tuition increase decided before people start enrolling in fall classes. That's the timeline. That's why March becomes important. And then I mentioned employee benefits contracts. There is an increase in employee benefits costs. We'll know a little bit more. I'm waiting for information tomorrow. We'll give more information to the board. We're not looking to push that on to employees, so we're looking to have the college absorb that increased costs within this structure. That's built into what I've already showed you. It might be as high as about $500,000, something like that. In the context of health benefits, that's pretty normal. Thinking anything under $1 million in a given year is good for the college, or is acceptable. And we've done a good job over time with our wellness program, with self-insuring our health insurance, keeping those increases as low as possible. And we actually have not pushed those increased costs to employees, which is what many other employers have done over the last number of years. So we want to sort of keep that commitment going. I find it to be objectionable if you give a 1% increase to employees and then turn around and hit them on the employee benefits costs, where it's a bigger increase than that. That's really not a great way to approach things. So April, there'll be a study session. We'll talk more about compensation at that point, more about the budget at that point. And then I mentioned May and June, what happens in those timeframes. So I provided some additional information. I'm not going to go through all of that stuff. Again, it's sort of just to show where the calculations come from, unless the board has questions on those. I'll pull up the little model, we'll play, and then I'm happy to entertain any questions you all may have.
It would be helpful for me that when you do a comparison of what the other college districts are going to do with a tuition increase, you would show what the tuition is.
That is typically how we do it. Sorry we didn't show that in here. We are third highest right now, but we are very close to the next 4 or 5. But we'll have that information. We'll have a chart that'll show that to you in March. Absolutely.
And then what a $1, $2, and $3 increase in tuition would be percentage-wise compared to what they're paying.
Okay, so we're close to 100. We're about 90-ish dollars. So a $1 increase is a little over 1%.
Okay. And did you mention what the estimated valuation increase would be in the taxing?
Yeah. I'm looking to see if it's got it in there. Yeah. Okay. So the taxable valuation of Pima County property. So this slide shows it, if you can see that. Yeah. I can't control that. Someone else is controlling that screen. Marcos, can you put the chart up on the smaller TV? There you go. Okay. So this is current year net assessed value. This is the upcoming year net assessed value. So there is an increase in in the assessed valuation of Pima County property. It's about $500 million, give or take. So it's in thousands. So it's $10 billion worth of assessed value for the property.
So that's 5%.
It's a 5% increase in the valuation. The growth in new property is like let's see if it has it in here. It's 1.7%, I think.
So do we know what percentage of that is new property as opposed
1.7% growth is the growth figure. That's what really matters to us. That's what translates in the $1.8 million that you see at the bottom here.
I'm not making myself clear. So part of that valuation increase is going to be new property.
Yeah.
And so the old property what percentage increase?
Okay.
Are you getting where
Yes.
where I'm going?
I will be happy to get that. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's gone up some, obviously. I mean, if you just do the math in your head.
So it would be helpful for me to know that the current taxing people, how much percentage increase they will have just because
Okay.
they were in their homes another year.
Great. We always show that before the tax decision. When I say that the tax levy can go up by 2%, when I keep saying that 2% number, that all things being equal, because there are some things that happen that aren't equal, but all things being equal, that would mean that there would be a 2% increase to their tax rate for the same property year over year. That's what a 2% increase means.
I understand that, but it won't be a 2% tax increase when they look at the bottom line on their tax
No,
bill.
it will, it will. The way that it works, so the assessment values go up. So say, I'm going to try and do this. Last year you have a property that's worth $100,000. It gets assessed at $110,000 this year. So that's a 10% growth, right? The tax rate that we charge would actually go down, so that your increase in your bill would go up by 2%. It wouldn't go up by 10% plus 2%, if that makes sense. I'll map that out for you. I'll show you how that works. But when we're able to, we adjust our tax rate downward because we're looking to get a specific dollar amount from all of our property. I'll say it a different way. If there was no growth in new property and assessment values stayed the same, okay, and the board adopted this 2% increase, everybody's taxes would go up 2%, okay? Different scenario, everybody's tax valuation, again, no new properties happen. The property values went up by 10%, and the board approved that 2% increase, the tax rate would actually go down a lot. Because what would happen is year over year, we're just trying to get that same 2% additional from each property, from the same value, the same controlled value property, if that makes sense.
So then if we put 2% on it and increase 10%, what would the net be?
So all other things being equal, it would be a net increase of 2%. So if they were paying $100, they would be paying $102. That's how it would play out. Even though their value of their house went up a lot, the tax rate would go down, and we would just get another 2% on that property. The only time that doesn't play out is if there's a distribution change in the valuation, where your property and my property goes up a lot more than your property in a given year, my taxes will be a little bit higher because of that. But we don't control that. That's Pima County assessor. That's the way it works. We just set what the tax rate is to get a dollar certain. And the assessment value of the property, if it goes up a lot, just means the tax rate is going to go down. And I'll show you that to you in March. Either in April. I'd be happy to show it to you in April. And I'll show you how it's gone over years. You can see how the tax rates go down when assessment values go up. I just don't have that on hand where I can show it to you. I can just tell you.
That would be helpful.
Hey, Maria, Wade has like 4 more questions, and then we'll
Go
let
ahead.
you take
Go ahead.
your questions.
Let him finish.
Thank you.
How does the credit rating affect us?
What it would do, it would have a marginal impact or negligible impact. I mean, it would be not great if it went down. We don't have we're not planning to borrow any more money. If we went out to borrow more money, a lower credit rating means we would have to pay more in interest. We would be less desirable, so we would have to pay more in
I
interest.
understand that, but I guess my question is, do we have debt that we're paying off?
Yes, we have revenue bonds where the annual payment is about $4 million a year, but they're fixed. So it doesn't have an immediate effect on our currently existing debt.
And what are they for?
The revenue bonds are for the Center of Excellence projects, so the automotive building, the advanced manufacturing building, some renovations related to science buildings at West Campus. So all of the showcase buildings, save aviation, because the state funded that. all the major improvements in our facilities in the last number of years came from revenue bonds proceeds.
So we can issue revenue bonds without passing a bond?
Correct. There is a cap on how much we can do, but we do have a fair amount of capacity to issue more revenue bonds.
What's when you showed the model that had, I'm calling it a step, what do you call it? A longevity?
The year of experience,
Year of experience. What is the average increase in salary for that?
it's about 2.5% on average. It does vary.
So in the first scenario, did that include decreasing the number of positions because our student-teacher ratio is high, low?
It doesn't include any decrease in regular positions. The one thing that we do that's sort of on the side, but we have a model for how much money we put for adjunct faculty. So that's our variable labor force, if you will. So if enrollment goes down, we reduce the number of classes we teach, and that's taught by adjunct faculty. The difference between those two is fairly small in terms of the variability. The amount of tuition revenue that we get for adding an additional class covers roughly what the cost of an adjunct faculty position is. It's a little bit of savings. If enrollment goes down, we pull money back from the campuses or from the departments, and we save money if we don't teach as many classes.
So we're talking about those 200 positions that.
When I said the 200 positions, those are regular positions that we reduced in the past.
But we're not going to reduce any of those even through attrition?
We are not planning to, but we're going to have conversations with the board as part of this 3-year planning perspective, because I think you're going to see that we probably need to do that. And that's what you see going forward when you start seeing these negatives out in the future. You start going, the budget, if our enrollment doesn't grow, we probably need to reduce the size of our staff. And we'll continue to have that conversation. But this budget for this upcoming year does not include any reductions in it at this point.
So we're assuming that we're going to have an increase that would reduce that ratio, or increase the ratio.
An increase in,
Student-faculty ratio.
so right now, our enrollment is up a little bit year over year, so our ratios are getting slightly better. They're still bad. And so, but it would be holding steady at the low. It's not making a lot of progress. It's not making progress towards a 15-to-1. It would be basically holding steady at the low, closer to 12-to-1 number.
So I guess my question is on that first scenario with no property tax increase and no tuition tax increase, that budget does not have any attrition for the number of faculty. And if we don't have an increase in student numbers, then that student-faculty ratio would stay the same.
Yes, correct.
So we would not be increasing it, even though we're low.
When I said increasing, I meant like at the margins, because enrollment's slightly higher than the current year, or this year's enrollment is slightly higher than low. But yes, that's technicality. But yes, for all intents and purposes, yes, I agree with you completely.
So these budget projections are based on what enrollment increases?
None, these are flat. These assume flat enrollment.
So what happens if we get more students? Do we have a formula that?
Yeah, so I referenced the adjunct faculty, that we have a model, the way the budget, and you won't see it in here anywhere in these numbers, but what we do is we have a growth reserve. So we have money set aside. We put tuition a little high, and we have expenses a little high. And that's on the occasion that if enrollment goes up, we will be able to add classes for those students. So we build capacity for it, but it's not in anything that I'm sort of talking about here. But we do have capacity to grow if enrollment goes up.
Okay, it would be helpful for me to see. I'm confused again. What we call the 1-year longevity, the percentage that the average employee gets, and the percentage that we have to put into getting everybody to the midpoint, and the percentage of the fringe benefit increase if we assume all the additional costs.
Okay.
I like percentages.
Sure. No problem. And definitely in the April study session, we'll get into that compensation conversation, but the benefits conversation, I'll have that for March.
Great. That's all for now.
Okay,
Maria.
I guess it's my turn now? Oops,
Yes, it is.
okay. Oh, wait, thanks for all those questions you asked. I really appreciate that. Okay, so my questions are probably more simplistic. Dr. B, what I'd like to ask is, when you built the ratio for student and faculty ratio, do you guys take into consideration that it takes more time for a faculty member to teach online classes? And that the faculty has to supervise the adjunct faculty? You know, it seems like, anyway, from what I've learned anyway, is that they're way overloaded. And so then my other question is, when you're talking about staff per student ratio, are you also including the administrators, not just faculty? Because, as you know, we're heavy on administrators.
Okay.
And how is that going to be adjusted?
Okay. Any other questions or?
No, that's it.
Okay. First question related to, there is conversation going on related to faculty work expectations and so forth. That's going to be a multi-year conversation, but there are conversations particularly related to department chairs. Anything that I'm talking about is year over year, same thing in terms of expectations of what the workload is. There's not an additional workload related to it, but it's not a reduction of workload either. In terms of the staffing numbers, the ratio that I talked about does include administrators, so that when I'm saying that going back, we're at a 12-to-1 ratio, that includes all staff. If you go down to a 15-to-1, that administrators would be in that. I will point out a couple of things that are also important to understand. The college in 2011 had, I think it was 2000, actually it was a little bit before. The peak administrator number for the college was 64. We now have 45 administrator positions. There have been big administrator reductions over the years, consolidating operations. The most notable of which is there used to be presidents at each campus. There's no longer, there's one person overseeing that operation. There's a lot of other consolidation that has happened. There used to be a vice chancellor of HR. There used to be a vice chancellor of facilities, for example. Those are now lower level positions. So that's also a reduction in costs. Looking at IPED's numbers for management positions, slightly different definition of what a Pima administrator is in a management position. So there are more management positions at Pima because that includes directors and a couple of other positions. Looking at IPED's information, the college is slightly high versus our peer institutions, not much. So for example, our management as a percentage of total salaries and wages, so that's a percentage of total personnel costs essentially, is 12%. Average for two-year institutions is, we are at 11.8%. Average two-year institutions, 11.7%. Other peer institutions, around 11%. So it's in the ballpark. In terms of management as total expense, also, it's in the ballpark. We're not particularly heavy in terms of management or administrators, largely because we've reduced a lot of it over time. In terms of savings over time, administration is often a target for reductions. It's kind of a false, it's a false target because the percentage of salaries that go to administrators is about 6% of what we're talking about. It's a very small slice of the pie. And it is, again, we have reduced significantly from the peak at the college. We're a lot leaner in terms of administrators. It doesn't mean that, but as Board Member Garcia points out, they are in the ratios so that as we shrink, if we shrink as a college significantly, you probably also shrink a little bit in management because you have fewer people that you're supervising, there are fewer responsibilities, so you can streamline management as well. So I'm not saying no to that. I'm just saying that historically we have, and it is included in the ratio, but that ratio is actually not that far out of whack versus our peers.
And then, I'm sorry, but I have one more that you don't have to answer it now. But when you present the other data that Chairperson Wade asked for. I'm sorry, you're the vice chair. But anyway, if you could include on the bond money, the revenue bond money, okay, we had a master plan. It was very specific as to how it was going to be spent. Okay, you didn't mention the fact that that revenue money also included the hotels. So if you could just give us a complete list in the future of how that money is being spent.
Sure, and we provide that information to the board on a pretty routine basis. The Finance Audit Committee saw that information last week, and I think we will share exactly the same information with the board at the, I think we probably have time to put it in the agenda. We can put it as an information item for the board, so you all can see that.
Well, Dr. B, sorry, but it's not real specific as to the total amount that was, with the revenue bond, and then all the expenses that have occurred with it, where it's been spent. I guess I don't understand it.
And I'm happy to provide that information, and if you want additional information, I'm happy to clear that up as well. So
Okay,
revenue
thank
bonds projects were about $65 million. We've spent all but around 10 to 11 of that now. So we're finishing up the projects and spending on the revenue bonds. On an annual debt service, it's around $4 million, a little more than $4 million of debt that we have. And they were based on 20-year pay downs. So we're in about year 4 of 20 years.
Well, what is our bond rating?
AA- and AA3 for the revenue bonds. We're a little bit higher as an institution. So revenue bonds are typically a little bit lower rated than the institution as a whole. Which is, by the way, a very healthy rating.
So I have a question about jumping on to what Board Member Garcia asked about the administrators. I don't remember what it was like. I don't ever remember hearing managers when I was an employee 2019 and prior. So I was wondering if there's any way, partly so we know who our people are too. Is there any way we can get a list of, I've tried to get it on our directory, but one at a time takes a long time, and I'm sure you all have it in a database. You could just do an SQL thing and get it for us, just so we know names, positions, and where they mainly work, just so we know if we run into them.
Want all positions, all people? I remember this is over 1,000 folks. Just to say, I'm just trying to narrow it down. If you want something less than that, if you want people above a certain band level. Administrators and managers, just so we know who Maybe
they are.
that category that I referred to, the management category?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then another thing that I should know, because I was faculty forever, but 50 footsie to 1 faculty member, it seems, I would like you to explain it, because I'm sure if I'm having a hard time understanding it, people who weren't faculty might not understand what does that equate to? How many classes, how many students in a class? And I know that, thank you.
A little bit apples and oranges. It is a ratio that itself doesn't mean much other than the number of regular faculty you have that is connected 50 to 1. It's actually a lot lower than that because, again, we're not even near the target number. We're quite a bit lower than that. It means the number of regular faculty you have in proportion to the full-time equivalent students you have. It means that. It does not mean how many students are in each class. That is much closer. We have 2 other metrics for that we use in our funding model for classroom. It's called a classroom funding model. For in-person classes, we target an average of 20 to 1 in terms of the budget target. And for online, we target 25 to 1. It varies. So when I say it averages 20 to 1 in person, it does factor in if a person is teaching what's called a very high, I can't remember what the phrase is, it's very high something. Nursing, for example, on-site has a ratio that they can't go over 10 to 1. It's something, I think it's 10 to 1 according to accreditation standards. So when I say it averages 20 to 1, that factors in that nursing is at 10-1, and nursing is funded up to have the appropriate level of classes for their faculty to student ratio. Anyway, so they are analogous, and mathematically they would be connected to each other, because like I said, if you have the ratio of full-time students and full-time faculty, I said that also then controls the number of adjunct faculty you have, and we have a funding model to make sure that we have appropriate numbers in terms of the total numbers of students to faculty in a classroom. That was a lot to say, and we would probably have to get into some real weeds to get any more than that. They
Yeah.
are all interconnected, and they're all pretty good ratios in terms of measuring versus our peer institutions or appropriate measures to make sure that you have solid education in a community college model.
I think I'll need some more, because that doesn't
Yeah.
really answer for me.
That's a lot.
And then just one question, and we don't need to talk about it now, but maybe if you could help me understand this at a later point. So I know when I taught, and I know most of the full-time faculty that I know teach overloads. So instead of just teaching 5 classes, we were teaching, I usually taught 8 or 9, whatever the max was, I taught most of the time. And so how, if we're under that that benchmark, whatever you want to call it, but so many full-time faculty are teaching so many overloads, it seems like there's something weird is going on with the mathematics, and I want to get my head wrapped around that.
I will find a way to try and map that out. It's going to be it's complicated because there's a lot of, as you can tell, there's a lot of different pieces to that. Just off the top of my head, how you just described that, what that means is, while I said that the 50-1 number, again, if we actually were hitting that target and we're heavy, so it's much, I think it's like 43-1 or something like that. If we were hitting that 50-1, it would also then mean that I think the percentage of adjunct and full-time classes that are taught is roughly 50-50, but I'd have to go back. It's roughly that. Now, in the way that you were saying it, if you have full-time faculty teaching a bunch of overloads, to me, those overloads get loaded as an adjunct faculty cost, right? And so to me, not to other people, to me, those look like they're taught by adjuncts. What that would mean is, instead of if it was 50-50, right? If it was 50% are being taught by full-time faculty and 50% are being taught by adjunct faculty, it actually would mean that maybe 51 or 52% were being taught by full-time faculty and 48 were being taught by adjunct faculty, which would be a healthier ratio in terms of full-time faculty, right? You want your full-time faculty teaching classes. So if that's the case, and I know that is, I know there are examples of it, I definitely know that. What it would mean is it's probably a little bit heavier than I would even say in terms of what the ratio of adjuncts to full-time is. But we'll figure out some ways to show you guys that.
So I don't know if there's a question in here, so forgive me if this is a little stream of consciousness, but I just wanted to lay sort of my cards out on the table for you as I'm looking at this in terms of taking away whatever it is. I'll start by saying I'm not opposed to tax increases or tuition increases, but I'm very mindful of the fact that we're in a community now where affordable housing is becoming increasingly an issue, and so again, I'm not opposed to increasing the property taxes, but my first blush reaction is hesitancy to do that, because not only for the cost for property owners, but also for the cost of rent and everything else that rolls down and makes things less and less affordable, unless we have a really good reason to do that, and there may very well be. And by the same token, the students that we serve and the students we want to create opportunities for are not generally of means. And so, my first blush reaction, again, to increasing tuition, again, I'm not opposed to it, but is just to be very hesitant of that. And coming from that framework, if we get up here and we honestly say we're not running terribly efficiently, but we should increase all of these things, that strikes me as really problematic. And so what I'm hopeful that we can get to is something that potentially combines needed increases to keep up with some costs, make sure we're meeting our obligations to faculty and staff, with some strategic decisions around right-sizing the organization so that we're dealing with both the revenue and the expense side simultaneously. So I said there's not really a question in there. There's not, other than to say, like, you know, when I'm talking about these models, I'd love to see a comprehensive model at some point that can deal with both of those simultaneously to figure out if we're going to need to raise taxes or raise tuition, how do we do that in a way that is reasonable given the environment we're in, where the college is also saying, okay, we're also making strides, maybe even aggressive strides, to right-size the organization so that we're efficiently using tuition dollars and taxpayer dollars.
Two questions that I clearly heard you say. First one is, I want to put a little bit of context around the tax increase. For when I say a 2% increase, the average taxpayer in Pima County, the average house, so not commercial, so the average residential, the average bill to Pima Community College would be around $200, give or take. I mean, I'm being really round, but it's about that. So a 2% increase to that tax bill year over year means they're paying $4 a year more. So when we increase, because we have such a large tax base, we don't have to increase very much that impacts individuals, but the cumulative effect for the college is significant. That's really a luxury. And I'm not saying that I would take tax increases lightly by any stretch, but I want to make it clear that when we say a 2%, we're not jacking tuition rates up that are going to really hit people hard. The impact for most people is almost not noticeable, particularly in their tax bill. With other taxes going up significantly more than ours would be, we would be the non-noticeable one. We typically don't get many comments when we do increase taxes. Average would be one comment a year when we increase, and that's when we increase taxes. So I think people recognize the value that Pima College provides. Now, to get to the second answer to the question you clearly asked, the same pressures that our taxpayers are experiencing, our people are experiencing. There were a number of years because of expenditure limitation, because of budget cuts, that we kept. There's a reason why our salaries needed to be recalibrated with this class comp study. And our employees took that a little bit themselves because the college didn't have resources to give increases. So the answer, I think, to the question of like, how could you justify what is, you know, a moderate type of an increase, whether it's either on tuition or on the property tax side, would be it's helping to support our employees at the college. And there were a number of years where they didn't get significant increases. And we're in a position where we can, I think, do a moderate job, but they're also experiencing the effects of inflation. So,
thank you. I know, I appreciate that. And the thought that pops into my head in that is, I don't know that those two things are mutually exclusive. Like that, you know, we can support the needed growth in salaries to help all of our employees and to make up their costs, but also make sure if we're heavy in staff we don't really need to fulfill the mission of the college. It's not a choice between those two. You do both.
if we have a minute, and I know we've run over, but this has been a great conversation, and I think, Lee, it's up to you, but I have the model that I can show, which actually gets at what you're talking about, which is looking at the revenue increase. What does that kind of revenue increase, and then potentially offsetting some of that with reductions over time. And then we can build in some expectations, particularly as we talk in the future about a 3-year plan. Again, we don't have to solve all of the world's problems in fiscal year 24, but we can set the plan in place for a 3-year plan where, well, okay, let's try to reduce through attrition over time $1 million a year. So this little guy here can actually show you that. So this right now, so this one matches the one you had in your packet with a 2% increase and a $3 increase, and it shows that 2% increase for the pool. And then down here, I can put in a line where we reduce. So we say, okay, let's target a reduction. So going forward in time, say, for example, you wanted to say, well, let's do the salary wage pool increase. Give us a little bit more ability to handle employee priorities, get a little bit further along with the new class comp structure, give minimum increases, do an increase to the adjunct wage. Let's make that 3%, okay? And say we do a 3% tax levy increase, so we go halfway. That keeps us about where I was at. And let's just, for the point of trying to make a balanced budget here. Sorry, I didn't quite get there. Okay, so now we have a slightly more than balanced budget, give or take. So it's so this is a 3% tax levy increase, a tuition increase of $5. Gives us enough salary pool ability to do a 3%. Now let's go into 25 and say, okay, well, I don't know about that going all the way to the max. Let's not kind of commit to that. Let's see if we can do a really small tuition increase, but we still want to keep making progress with our employees. Sorry, I just hit the wrong one. Okay, so now you're looking at next year, the projection. So this is a projection, right? We're like guessing at some increases that are going to happen in the next year. But now we're looking at the balance is out of whack, right? So then it would be like, okay, let's look to reduce positions to make up that difference. Find through attrition, let's come up with a plan for making some reductions. And so that's where you could then put in and I did a lot. There we go. I do not think we can reduce by 20 million. But $2 million, and that would be, let's come up with a plan. What does a plan look like that would reduce, that would balance this through some reduction, combination of increasing revenues, but also reducing expenses? That's how it would look.
No, I appreciate that. And again, just for your information, for either of you, I'm not saying like we should make cuts, but what I'm trying to, not necessarily, what I'm trying to say is, if you're looking for, at least from me, I can't speak for all of us, at least from me, the backing to say, okay, we need to make strategic choices for the college about what we want to invest in and what we don't, including personnel. I'm okay with that. Like, I will back you in that as long as there's some strategy behind it and it's about, furthering the mission, because just continuing to support this infrastructure, if you don't really need it for the future of the college, I don't know what that means, but like, you all have to tell me that, but I'm interested in hearing what you think about that.
So to that point, there's a lot of moving pieces to what you're saying. So I'll just touch on just a few of them. So for example, what we know today is less of our students are actually going to an associate's degree and then transferring. More of our students are either exiting at the AJAC level, or more of our students are certificate students. So we're not designated as a degree granting institution by the Department of Ed, based on what I'm sharing with you. So if you take it that way, one might argue if you have to reduce a budget, you don't need to offer as many degrees because most students aren't going and seeking a degree. So I'll just use for a round number. Let's say we have 10 degree pathways, maybe you only need 2. So that would be the strategic choice. Do we go from 10 to 2 and then reallocate some of the research to the front end to drive more enrollment to what we can offer? So let me go to the enrollment side. What we do know is projected 15 to 17% decline in the high school age population over the next 10 years in Pima County. We know that. So we're not going to grow enrollment from the K-12 population side. The only way we have an opportunity to grow enrollment is on the working learner side. They're not seeking that degree piece. We're hearing this all the time. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested more in this micro pathways, more on the online pieces, but it's shorter term. So if we can reallocate to that piece, focused on the adult learner, do more work-based learning, then that's where we're going to be more competitive. But it means backing away from what Pima was historically, a transfer institution. We're not that anymore. And it's like, I need the board to support that in order for us to do that, and then we get to these cuts. Otherwise, we're either going to have to increase revenue just to maintain what we have when you know that that's not sustainable. We either skate to where that puck's going now, or it's just going to happen to us. And then it's going to be harder to maintain what we have. I'd rather do it with intentionality, be very strategic about it. It will be painful. It will hurt. But it's also facing the reality that's unfolding. So then let me go to the issue of adjunct faculty. keep reducing and we want to maintain full-time lines, the full-time have to do adjunct teaching. So that's one facet. Let's say that we don't want the full-timers to teach that much overload, then we're going to have to make a commitment to adjunct faculty and give them priority, the non-full-time faculty, priority for those courses. If we don't do that, we're going to lose more full adjunct faculty because they'll realize I can't get work at Pima Community College any longer, so I have to go somewhere else to seek that work. We're in competition for adjunct faculty, not just with the U of A. They have options to teach online from anywhere in the world. And I think we're seeing some of that. That's why the pressure you're starting to see around needing to go out of state to attract adjunct faculty, especially for Pima Online. I think those pressures aren't going to subside. They're going to get more exacerbated as we go over time. So those are just some examples of where I think things are unfolding.
I appreciate that. And I guess from my perspective then, that it impacts the budget, right? And so I'd love to understand better what that vision and strategy is. I mean, if you came back to me and said that means we need more staff and we should talk, but then fine, like it doesn't have to be fewer, but I want to make sure that when we're making decisions about what we do for the budget, that the budget is driving the college strategy and that the strategy is driving the budget and not the budget is driving the strategy. And so that's the part I guess I'm wanting more of.
And you're going to see us become even more intentional about that strategy. Then we step back and say, okay, based on the strategy, what goals do we set? Based on the strategy, what resources do we need in order to fulfill that direction that we're moving in? And that will drive all of what you're seeing up here. So the 3-year scenario that Dave's talking about is the board telling us, we want you to look at resetting, say, by $5 million. That will tell me how much of the strategy I can actually deploy. Now, if you're willing to be more open-ended than that, we'll come back to you and say, we think this is the winning strategy. That may mean reducing by $20 million, or it could mean we need to invest more. We don't know which one that is yet, but if you're open to a more open approach to that, that's what we would do. Or if you want to have a more managed approach by saying, like we did prior, where we came up with 3 scenarios, they were at different cut levels. The board chose, I think it was a $15 million reduction level, and we reduced to that number. We can do that too.
I guess for my purposes, and again, I would rather have that strategy discussion and then figure out how the budget aligns to the strategy than try to align your strategy to the budget. Because I think when you go through these scenarios, which are useful, but I think the temptation is always like, pick the one in the middle, because it's like the easiest one, you feel like you're compromising, but it doesn't mean that's the best one or really what's going to drive what you need. And so I'm looking anyway for that larger strategic picture and then figure out how the budget fits underneath rather than just like picking among whatever these options are.
I think this is the perfect retreat discussion for May, that we come to you with this strategy and show you why this is the approach that we need to go in. Here's the data that supports that, as well as, remember, data only allows you to answer what is. It doesn't allow you to answer what could be. And so I think sometimes we get lost in the data trying to project the future. The data is not going to help you project the future. It's just going to help you tell you what you're working with right now. And so we can do some of that too. Some of this is an art, not just a science.
So related to the upcoming decision related to tuition, what we have done, we've done it a few different ways. We've put forward a recommendation for a singular number. We've also put in what, okay, we recommend a $3 increase to do X, and then show also what a $1 or what a $5 or whatever, much like what we did here, asking for some feedback from the board on what the board would like to see come March in terms of that, because unfortunately the timing isn't ideal with super strategy. Happy to do that. I think that that's going to be a great set of conversations, but we do have this decision related to tuition coming up, and it probably is a good time. Well, I would appreciate any feedback the board might have for that.
Like we discussed the other day, for me, It's difficult for me to have a tuition conversation without a tax conversation. And so when I vote to make a decision on tuition, I'm also already got in my mind what I want to vote on as far as the tax situation is. And maybe in the future, it'd be helpful if we could make those decisions closer together. You know, I don't know what that does to the timeline, but I don't suspect we're having, it wouldn't be detrimental to make the tax decision quicker.
No, it actually would clarify things. February is when we get the tax assessment information, so we know what the growth is at that point. That gives you a really good idea. So anytime after that is when, you know, anytime after that to March. See, that's the problem, is it starts, you know, one thing, things have different timelines associated with them. But that's essentially, once we get that February information, and we can usually estimate it pretty decently, we could have that conversation kind of like what we're having now, only more formally, right?
Thank you.
And again, if we build the 3-year plan, then there will be a foundation from which we're actually building it from, instead of sort of, because it's sort of starting anew a little bit right now with the conversation.
So, Madam Chair, I don't think we have time to do all of the next set of presentations, so I'd like to know what your desire is. Do we do the 4-year one, or do we do the board priorities one, and then we have to do your assessment?
I think we should do the 4-year baccalaureate, and maybe if we can go a little quicker through the slides, if that's a possibility.
He'll try.
Ian,
Come on
Thank
up,
you.
Ian. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, Board Chair, members of the Board, Chancellor, colleagues, and guests, very excited, and thank you for keeping it on the agenda to talk about our exploration and possible implementation of baccalaureate degrees at Pima Community College. Pardon my raspy voice, I've also been suffering from allergies with all the wind and weather changes. So again, right now, because ultimately, as with all new programs, the final decision for what we could offer with respect to baccalaureate degree regimen at Pima rests with the board, as further stated in Senate Bill 1453, which we'll go over in a little bit of detail as a part of this presentation. So we do not want to have any foregone conclusions as to what our baccalaureate degree regimen is, or that we will in fact move forward, although many individuals are hopeful that we will, including a group of students we met with, the Student Senate, just recently. So we have formed what is called the Baccalaureate Degree Exploratory Committee, or Baccalaureate Degree Committee for short. This is just the initial committee for this phase. There are other people who will be added and other subgroups that will come out of this initial work. So you will see that it is predominantly composed of deans and also faculty, and we have members of the committee here, and because they have taken time from their day, I just would like to recognize those that are in the room. We have in the back Wendy Weeks, not a dean, not faculty, our AVC of Curriculum Quality, CQI. Wendy's role on the committee is extraordinarily important because she is our go-to for the accreditation pieces related to this new sort of offering, as well as our curriculum and new program timelines. We have Amanda Abens, Dean of Workforce Development Lifelong Learning. We have Faculty Senate President and Biology Faculty Rita Lennon, and as one of our lead faculty members. And is there anybody else? No. Oh, Vanessa, Dr. Vanessa Adiano, who is also serving in a project management capacity. She is on acting assignment in the Provost's office currently as Director of Provost's initiatives. We also have Cecily Westfall representing finance. For a reason I'll talk about in this presentation, we felt that finance needed to be in the room from the onset. There are limiting factors in the legislation with respect to how much we can charge for these programs. So briefly, we'll talk about the context, what we're calling the application and the rubric, and that was sent to you ahead of this meeting, as well as the timeline as it stands. So what's really interesting about Senate Bill 1453 is the way that really aligns to the vision and the direction that we are currently headed with respect to centers of excellence at the institution, and really framing our exploration and possible implementation of baccalaureate degrees in a workforce development context and in an equity context. The equity context is pretty clear, that we have the ability to offer the same level of award as universities at a much lower cost for the community that we serve, while at the same time ensuring that we are not sacrificing quality or the workforce outcomes that are specified and that are aligned to our mission and value proposition. And so it really is about meeting the needs of these new majority learners. And while we will continue to serve more and more working adults through micro pathways, through work-based learning, there are components of that work that can actually be integrated into baccalaureate degree offerings so that we have a clear value proposition and a mark of differentiation from our university partners. So in essence, we're not competing. We have something different to offer. So the presentation is hyperlinked, and highly recommend just going to those whenever you have the opportunity, and recommend to all of my colleagues and friends to really read the Arizona Senate Bill 1453. I've only captured 3 primary bullet points there, but really specifies and puts the guardrails on all 10 community college districts in Arizona with respect to what can we do, what can we offer, and how many can we offer from that context. Really clearly outlines that this has to meet a workforce development need in the community that is otherwise not being met. It really puts a lot of guardrails on ensuring that there is not unnecessary duplication, and that's a quote from the legislation, with our partner universities in the region. It did not specify Pima County and Maricopa County by name, but they did the typical any county with a population of over 750,000 people in it. Here are your additional requirements. And so we have those additional requirements. Equally, Coconino College, Maricopa, and Pima Community College have another facet, which is we have to keep our university partners informed. Interestingly, in the legislation, one particular piece of detail is 60 days before we bring to you, our elected board, very specific pieces related to the baccalaureate degree regimen for your approval. We have to send that same information to the University of Arizona. The University of Arizona does not have a veto over what we offer, but the University of Arizona can directly protest in a letter to the board if they are not satisfied with the direction that we are going. That's very specifically written into the legislation. And so that's why ensuring that there's no unnecessary duplication is crucial. Yes, sir. Board Member McClain.
Can you give us further clarification on what you think that third bullet means?
Unnecessary, ensure that there is not unnecessary duplication. So in other words, if I mention a program, it doesn't mean that this is like in the balance right now, but common considerations come up, such as, well, we have a nursing shortage in our community, and we offer LPN, licensed professional nurse, we offer associate degree nursing, so we should just automatically offer bachelor's degree in nursing as well, because we will help solve that workforce problem. But there's other components into that the University of Arizona may look at that and say that's unnecessarily duplicating our nursing program because you can't find the clinical spots now for the nursing program that you have. So it is not specified in the law what unnecessary duplication is, but if right now we propose to offer a bachelor's degree for which there is no labor market data to support it, and that bachelor's degree is offered by the University of Arizona already, that would be considered unnecessary duplication. Yes, sir. Oh, one more thing about the guardrails I forgot to mention. It's not on the bullet point. How do I go back on that? Is the number of programs that we are allowed to offer as a college district is also specified and limited within Arizona Senate Bill 1453. After we launch our first proposed baccalaureate degrees, of which will be 2, and we'll get to the reason why there, we are allowed only for 4 years afterwards to offer 5% of our total offerings at that level. And then after that, we are capped at 10% of our total offerings at the baccalaureate degree level in perpetuity, or unless the law changes. So there's a limit on that. Equally, the upper division courses, so junior, senior year courses, can only be offered at 150% of current tuition and fees at the institution. So the other guardrail that is imposed, of course, is through our accreditor, the Higher Learning Commission. There's a lot of text on this slide, but like any new program, Higher Learning Commission approval is required prior to launching the baccalaureate degrees as a new program. The second and third bullet point are really crucial because we get asked a lot. Maricopa's making announcements about offering 7, maybe 8 baccalaureate degrees coming this fall, and we're 1 year behind on that timeline from where they are. How come we can't offer just as many as they can? And the reason is in the structural difference between the colleges and the district in Maricopa as compared to Pima Community College. So as you can see on the slide, per Higher Learning Commission rules, we can only offer 2 baccalaureate degrees initially. And the exact quote on why is on the slide. Don't do that often, but I wanted to read that for everybody's edification. If an institution plans to request approval for a 3rd program at a new degree or credential level, it must also submit a request to change its mission and student body. The institution may submit this request before or in conjunction with its request to offer or to add a 3rd program. So per the Higher Learning Commission, we are an associate degree granting institution. We can punch above our weight 2 times, 2 baccalaureate degrees before we have to go through a significant process through CQI that would involve lots of individuals at the college. It's not like full accreditation, but it's just a couple clicks below that. And then once receiving that approval, then we can continue to add to the regimen. So there's a limiting factor on the initial number from our accreditor. So the committee was formed in late spring, really started the work over the summer of 22, did a lot of homework and a lot of reading. There's a lot of research and publications. About half of the states in the union have now authorized community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees, some as long ago as 20 years ago. So it's great to see that Arizona has moved in and joined our peer institution or our peer states in that respect. There's also been a lot of interest from faculty, from deans, from community members in terms of what they want to offer, what they believe we should be offering. And so we really wanted to take a meticulous and phased approach to considering how are we going to bring that recommendation to the executive leadership team, to the provost, to chancellor, like we do all other new programs, and to the board to ensure that we have done our due diligence to meet all of the guardrails and all the parameters that I've spoken of and more that haven't been able to address today. And so, and we also have received a lot of guidance on the timeline with respect to HLC. And that not only includes HLC, but just like every other new program award, this has to be submitted to the Department of Ed, to Veterans Affairs, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of distinct mini timelines within the macro timeline that have to be met to need that. So right now, deans and faculty are currently working on phase 1 of the application. We wanted to do this in 2 phases because there are a lot of considerations that have to be made before we make a final decision. And so we didn't want individuals to have to do too much work if their candidate wasn't really falling within the guidelines or the parameters, or if it wasn't aligned to the strategic direction of the institution from the onset. And so the first phase is due on March 1st. I have been notified of 4 different divisions and maybe as many as 10 different ideas so far coming forward through this process. The first phase will be a description of the program overall, the labor market analysis in conjunction with STAR here at Pima and workforce development, a competitor and collaborator analysis, and that's really board member claim meant to address that. Are we unnecessarily duplicating intentionally or unintentionally with our idea? And then an initial focus on closing barriers to learner success and advancing equity. So is there real upward mobility if I earn this bachelor's degree? Is there real upward mobility in our community with that credential? Second phase, same process, but many, many more data points. And you can see some of those there, and I'll spare the time on reading all of them, but really looking at is this something that we can build upon with relatively low cost and high return on investment in the end, or is this something that's going to require new labs that we don't have? There are certain areas where, even though it may, per the Higher Learning Commission, require a master's degree faculty, for example, many health professions, their external accreditor or agency may require PhD faculty, and so there's an element of cost that comes in with respect to those, or just, it's a small faculty pool and it's really hard to recruit faculty, particularly at PhD level, including especially in technical areas, as they oftentimes may be more rare And then also, what are the work-based learning opportunities that we could incorporate into our baccalaureate degree regimen? And what are the distinctive features that we could add into our program overall? One of the challenges that the chancellor brought to the group was that whatever the program area is, whatever it is, we need to work in our climate action and sustainability plan as well as our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, not necessarily as discrete courses or distinct courses, but somehow thematically competency in those domains needs to be addressed in our awards. There's a lot of flags on this timeline, and so I highly recommend looking at in your slide deck, and the text is really small even on that screen there. So we are in the January, February timeline there. The phase 2 application will begin in March, and so then we propose that by October of 23, we will be submitting, if the board so decides, we will be submitting our first 1 or 2 to the Higher Learning Commission in October of 23. So a lot of compressed activity right now, then not a lot of compressed activity because the wait time at Higher Learning Commission and other entities is sometimes lengthy. And then finally, we would be putting it in the catalog in the 25-26 catalog in April of 25, marketing campaign, and then in August of 25 would be the potential launch of our first 2 baccalaureate degrees at Pima Community College. So currently we are communicating with lots of groups. Favorite one so far, other than you, has been our Student Senate. They really were excited about this opportunity coming to the institution, and so that really kind of charged up the group even more about the work that's currently underway. We will be working with Provost Dolores Durancerda on our university partner forums to ensure we're not getting too far ahead or out of scope in any way that would damage our relationship with our university partners. And then community forum, we are going to have it's going to be a part of Futures coming up that Dr. Nick Richmond leads, but we will also be engaging the business community directly through the Chambers of Commerce and a survey on what are some of the pain points with respect on the ground that they are not able to fill at the baccalaureate degree regimen. And then our final selection is proposed to be in April, although we've given ourselves a little bit of a cushion on that. And then from there, of course, there will be the necessary subgroups involving these areas and potentially more as we develop and implement these potential new offerings. Academic affairs, financial aid, registrar, finance, so on and so forth. So I tried to go as quick as I could, Sherry. I hope that was helpful. And are there any questions or thoughts?
I go back to the duplication of services. I'm thinking more in terms of competition. So I'm assuming that the University of Arizona connection is going to be a strong relationship that we have to nurture. But what about the other groups like University of Phoenix, Chapman College, those kinds of colleges that are here offering baccalaureate degrees that sometimes fly underneath the radar?
So the law, specifically the Senate Bill 1453, only pertains to the state universities. But the market analysis that we are asking programs to go through needs to include all of those facets of competition within the community, because it would be a great expense for us to develop a baccalaureate degree only to be undercut by a competitor that's already offering the same thing. And we just didn't take that into consideration. We only focused on the University of Arizona.
I'm just assuming we can beat them.
Well, there are a lot of good ideas, and again, I think that it's going to be a matter of the labor market proposition, the unique and distinct experience that learners in our community are going to have at Pima, and then also some of the new facets that we would like to introduce into the baccalaureate degree. So, for example, just a couple of, again, no fingers on scales, but there is no other entity that we know of in the community that's offering BAAS degrees or a Bachelor of Industrial Technology, or there are other offerings at those levels that are not BA or Bachelor of Science, for example. And that's what you see in many of the other states that are offering these. It's a distinct credential that's not unique, but mostly concentrated within the community college space.
Isn't NAU offering some of those?
I am not familiar with NAU offering associate or BAAS. We'll have to, we'll circle back to you on that, sir.
When we met Angelo in Washington DC, he was getting ready to transfer to a baccalaureate degree
NAU.
at NAU.
Right.
And some,
So we have partnered with NAU, especially in the automated industrial technology area, where they are offering that upper division that allows the students to get a bachelor's degree. And so I think that's probably the area, it's more generic than to AIT specifically. I think that's what he was referring to. But what this is raising, if you put aside for a moment what ASU is doing around their Polytechnic campus, that's where the real void is in the state. There is not a Polytechnic university like you see in the California system with the Cal Polys, right? I think that's a great opportunity for a place like Pima to go into that void that does not exist and then claim and own that space. Because no one's really thinking about that other than ASU as far as I know. So I think that's the unique value proposition that we have. If we go into other areas that others are going, even though they're in different parts of the state, then all of a sudden you're inviting a lot more competitors into your, in terms of the market. So being sensitive to the competition is, you're spot on, but I don't think anyone can compete with us on price. But the question is, going back to the earlier conversation, will we have the resources to sustain that investment? Because it will cost us more to run these programs, especially when we can only go 150% of our tuition level. Some of these programs may cost more because of the faculty cost, other library investments, whatever it might be. So we have to be sensitive to that reality.
so do we have to go to HLC when we change our name from what it is now to Pima Community and Polytechnic College?
But I think, you know, to that point, right, and is if you think we need to have more community conversations, we will do that. Because I know when I was first hired here, this was a sore subject for a segment of the community about Pima becoming a four-year institution. Effectively, what this does is turns us into a four-year institution. The times are different now, and the focus is a lot different than what I think was conceived of back then. So we'll be glad to have more, to allow more of that dialogue, and maybe one of those community things are with all those university partners, bring them in, because I will tell you this, they're not asking us to start certain programs. They just go and do it. So just keeping that in mind as well.
There's one point that I failed to make in the presentation on the HLC slide, and that is, why is Maricopa able to offer 7 and potentially more? And that is because every single one of their colleges is individually accredited, not through the district. And so they essentially have 20 opportunities before they have to go through that reaffirmation process with the HLC, whereas we only have one college.
When I was thinking about this, we have a huge teacher shortage in Arizona. And so I was thinking, well, how is the U of A going to be okay with us, you know, teaching teachers? But what a great competition model between the university and the college. And there may be a lot of people that would like to be a teacher, but they can't afford going to the U of A. So I'm just wondering how all that's going to play out when you know, you guys start negotiating with the universities. I'm really interested in hearing what's going to happen. Anyway, thanks. It was a great presentation, and I think that the board, you know, we've heard some of this before, and it is really exciting, and for our students especially. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
I know this was something that Maria had mentioned. I don't know if she's still on or has any other questions too. She brought it up in one of the board meetings. I feel like it was something that was important to her.
Maria, are you still here?
Here. Hi, I'm still here. I'm listening.
Wait,
I've been going in and out because I keep coughing so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Maria. Greg Taylor was saying that you had a question one of the prior meetings when we had been talking about this, and we were just wondering if you had any questions.
I just didn't want us to forget about you, Maria.
Chairman Riyad?
Yes, go ahead.
Chairman Riyad? I have not a question, but a comment. And I do agree, it was a great presentation. And one of the things that I see in reference to, as a comment that we should not lose sight in reference to the space capacity in reference to, in comparison to the student ratio as well too. We do have, 6 campuses now?
Yeah, we're still at 5.
Yeah, but we need to look at that with the little campus on the 22nd Street. But I feel that the board really need to look at all angles, what I'm trying to say. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier in reference to cost effective, cost efficient, I think the board really needs to really look at the true and the real picture of what we have. And I think it's up to us to come up and generate those questions to yourself, but also to Chancellor, to really have a full, complete picture of what we're going to be doing in reference to the budget that's upcoming very quick as well too. But that was a comment in reference to space capacity. The maintenance and operation for the 5 campuses is it's not cheap as well, especially when we don't have the students. But we need to relook and revisit and come up with a solution for that as well too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Let me just make one piece going back to the budget component, and then we're just really down to your last almost 10 minutes. Just going back on the budget piece for a moment, keep in mind that the students are scheduled to get an increase in their Pell. So even if we increase the tuition by a few dollars a credit, the Pell that they will receive would be more than enough to cover that increase and still leave some additional dollars for them. So just keep that in mind. We'll be glad to bring that part into the discussion so you know exactly what that looks like. So we're down to less than 15 minutes. I think we have time to do the item number 3. We just want to get a sense from you on this instrument that's in here. I know, Board Chair, you had suggested that other form. And so I'm wondering if we take that form and this form and just look at where the gaps are and then create the nice little electronic fill it out online versus having to do it by paper.
So my comments, I don't know if I shared this with the rest of the board members, but there are quite a few statements on the self-evaluation that are posed from the negative point of view, like the board does not talk bad about the college. And I don't want to be associated with a document like that. I want to say, you know, what we do great and just keep lifting the board up. So anything that this one does not direct the chancellor, you know, that was number 1. I believe the board adopts broad policies and uses its power to govern effectively, something like that, and not say the things that we're not supposed to do. Anyway, so that was my first thought. This one is also from a CCT, and it's shorter. There's 10 options. And the other thing I like about this one is it comments we're evaluating ourselves individually, and we're also evaluating the board as a unit. And I think that that's good too, because you know, if board members think that the board didn't do something, but I say, well, I was great at it, right? Then maybe I need to look at those and say, oh, well, maybe I need to do, you know, listen to the recording of the meeting and make sure that, you know, maybe I thought I was doing a good job and I didn't. Anyway, I like how positive all of these statements are. I went through the 21 on our list, and this first statement on this document, the board operates as a unit and honors board decisions. To me, that met the requirements that we had on the original one of number 2, number 9, and number 17. So it ends up, and there are many like that. So it ends up that number 6 isn't represented exactly, or even numbers 4, 5, 6, and I think those are the only 3 that aren't represented somehow in this one. So if there is something that we need to do with 4, 5, or 6, but I wrote them in positive words instead of in the negative one, so.
I agree. I like the idea of using the ACCT version that you had there. I mean, if for all the reasons you articulated, but also because presumably other boards are using that or a similar tool, and I think it allows us to more easily benchmark us against, how are we doing against some of our peers. So yeah, I like that idea a lot.
I agree with the chair.
Just so you know, Madam Chair, this instrument here was from one of the documents that you all received through your board retreat training. So it is also an ACCT document that we just modified, but we'd be glad to take that, maybe take where there's the gaps, as you pointed out, and just reframe them into one solid document and show, you individually and then board member. Now, I don't know if we can get benchmarking data from the other colleges who are using a similar instrument, if they're even doing that at all.
And then the only one that I don't feel comfortable putting on our document, no matter how we word it, is the 11th item on the original. And, oh wait, that's not it. Well, yeah, sort of is. I've been grappling with the words on the Arizona revised statute and I brought it up before, but 15-1444, and I think it's item number 4 or 6, and it just says the words, I don't know exactly, but it's something like the board shall visit all our community colleges and, effectively.
Sorry.
You say hold on, Madam Chair, when you want me to hold on. No, I'm sorry, I'm just joking. But I would like to make sure, I would like to, before we put an item such as that on our thing, to make sure that it doesn't go against, legal interpretation of what the state statute, because, according to the statute, our fiduciary responsibility is to visit, and it said, inspect efficiently the management, the procedures and practices. There were 3 things that it asked. And if we're not able to go and talk to the people on the campuses or, watch when they're having their groups and things like that, I don't see how we can do that. So before we put something like that on our document, because of course you all know currently I'm not doing that at all. I've been, talking to, I attended an AERC meeting that was amazing, and I've attended a faculty senate meeting too, just not to participate, but just to hear what they're talking about, to inspect efficiently, or whatever the words were. So thanks for that.
I like the 10 items of 1 page.
Maria and Luis on Zoom call, do you have any comments?
Well, one of the things that I would have liked to have seen, I agree with you that the shorter version is better. Yes, it is from ACCT, but then on the other hand, should we have not met as a committee to discuss this? I guess this is what it is, right? But I'm still opposed to being given documents that now you are supposed to read instead of being presented and treated like adults, to look at an item and say, okay, group, what do you think of this? And the other thing that I'd like to add to this is the fact that I would also like to see the chancellor's evaluation or self-evaluation on something similar to this. And I'm done. Thank you.
So just to respond to that, I agree, Maria, but this is, I think what we're doing right now, neither of these are for sure things we still get to decide. And the only reason that I took the shorter version is because I wanted to make changes, but then when I read the shorter version, this was also in our packet from one of our retreats from ACCT, you know, it was a no-brainer. You know, we could use something that was already written that met most of our needs, but we can change whatever we don't like in this one too.
Okay, thank you.
I also concur with the last document, but if we need to do some addendums, I think we should. But as make it the best as possible as we can.
Positive.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to, okay.
I don't think you need to take, well, you can't take an action here, first of all, right? And so, I mean, I think I have enough sense of the direction to go back and revise the document and then bring it to you for your approval. So I don't know if we can make that happen by this March meeting. Yeah, I think we can make it happen by this March meeting.
And if you have any questions, call the chair.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see everybody at our next board meeting, which I think is in about 2 weeks. Thank you, Pima College, for doing all the amazing things you're doing for our students and our community. We see you working hard every day, and we are so proud of all that you've done and that you continue to do, so thank you. And we're going to close the meeting. Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Thank you.